Another day, another preservation project. Today we are taking these 6 chicken carcasses that I have had in my freezer for quite some time and turning them into a delicious broth. I need some broth on my pantry shelf and I need the space in the freezer. I really like to keep my broth simple, so I go ahead and put a carrot in there. We've got a half an onion. I have 2 pucks of garlic and a bag of celery that was chopped and prepped and forgotten about. So in the pot it goes. A little bit of salt and pepper. I always salt my broth just because it really brings out the flavor, and then I don't have to worry about it when I'm cooking with it later on. This is going to go ahead and simmer for as long as possible. This winds up sitting on the stove, just simmering away for approximately 4 or 5 hours, and it just starts to smell delicious. You can tell those flavors are really getting in there. I do add a splash of distilled vinegar. You can add apple cider vinegar if you'd like. It really helps all the nutrients get extracted from those bones as you're cooking away. Look at that beautiful broth. So now this is the next day because, well, it got late and dinner and life. So we're gonna go ahead and get this jarred up. I usually can my broth in pints as well as quarts, but all I had was a fresh box of quarts from Azure Standard that needed to get used. And so I wound up just putting it in quarts this time. My pressure canner can hold 7 quarts, and so that's what I go ahead and fill up here. There was a little bit left over in the pot, which is totally fine because, as you'll see, I'm gonna make it into some delicious chicken soup for a sick kiddo. So once these are filled up to a 1/2-inch headspace, we're gonna go ahead and pressure can these. Chicken broth needs to get pressure canned. If you don't feel comfortable pressure canning, you can absolutely freeze this. I just like to have it shelf stable so that I can have it in its liquid form versus remembering to take it out of the freezer. If you do decide freezing is a better option for you, I tend to like using these deli containers. I can attach a link below. Yes, they are plastic, and I know that can cause some controversy, but it does work really well to have approximately 2 cups of broth per deli container. I obviously wait till this broth gets nice and cold before I put them into some sort of plastic. You also want to make sure that you leave a decent amount of headspace so that when it expands, as it freezes, it doesn't pop your lids off. Next step, we're going to go ahead and wipe the rims of these jars off with a little bit of white vinegar on a paper towel. This just makes sure that any chicken grease or liquid is not on the top of these jars, and we get a good seal once we put our lids and rings on. So typically you do not want to boil your lids. This can affect the seal and it just gets the seal too hot. I put my lids into my canner while I have hot liquid in there. Whoops, I gotta rewash that one because it dunked right in the jar. But I just warm up the seal so that it can go ahead and be a little bit soft, and you'll actually be able to tell. It'll be kind of sticky as you set it on the jar, and that way you know it's ready to rock. I go ahead and pop all the lids on these, and then we're gonna go ahead and screw the rings on just to fingertip tight. There you can see my little helper. He is climbing on the counter like he should not be. Handing me my rings, and we're just fingertip tight. Like I said, the more force you put into screwing these down, the higher likelihood you have of something buckling or it not sealing properly, because as these can, you want them to be able to release any of that pressure that's inside the jar to make sure that it's a safe seal. Once these all get rings on them, we're gonna go ahead and load them into the canner one at a time. Like I said before, my canner holds 7 quarts. This is the Presto version of a canner. I really like this one, but in all honesty, if I was to buy another canner, I would invest in a digital countertop canner. I really like the idea of being able to set it and not have to worry about the weight or watching the gauge, because in all honesty, with my stove, I wind up having to sit there and babysit it. Chicken broth is gonna can for 25 minutes. And sitting there for 25 minutes, making sure it stays at 10 pounds of pressure is kind of a pain. So once the lid is on, you're gonna wanna let it vent for 10 minutes. Letting that pot vent steam for 10 minutes is gonna ensure that you have the proper pressure in your canner before you add the weight and actually start timing. So see, my canner is steaming away. I have my timer set behind me on the microwave to make sure that I'm paying attention, because there's always a million things going on. Getting some chicken soup going for my sick kiddo with that extra broth. It was perfect. It was about 1 more quart, and so I wound up making soup and then saving a pint that I used for dinner later. As you can see, the steam is coming out pretty steadily, but there are still some blips in there, so I'm not quite ready to add the gauge. There's my sick kiddo enjoying his soup. So once I have a solid stream, I went ahead and put the weight on and then started timing once my canner got up to pressure. So this is after the 25 minutes has processed. I remove the weight after the canner has completely depressurized. This has been off the heat for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. And I just want to crack the lid. You really don't want to open this, take the lid right off all the way, because you can wind up with some shock in your jars. Siphoning can occur, which means that the stuff actually comes out of your jars into your liquid, which is not fantastic. And it's just a better option to make sure that they are a little bit closer to room temperature. Look at that beautiful liquid. I'm so excited to put these on my pantry shelf. This winds up being some of the best chicken broth I have ever made. I don't know if I did anything different in particular, or if it was the fact that I had more chicken carcasses in there than I typically do. It's probably that, but this was the most delicious chicken broth I have ever made. So once we get these all out of the canner, I always try to put them on a towel of some sort so that they have a little bit more of a heat absorption and it's not such a shock on the bottom of the jars. You want to be sure not to mess with the rings and the lids too much because it will affect your seal. The canning chorus is about to begin, and I'm so excited to put this on my pantry shelf.